guys, it's your boy Luke here for our round 2 prize picks preview for this week's RBC Heritage. Now round 1 wasn't our best, ended up going 2 for 5, which definitely isn't up to my standards, but got off to a better start in DFS, so our analysis this week, what we were looking at in terms of our modeling was working. Just need to make sure we're picking the right props this time around. I think the most glaring example of that yesterday was Terrell Hatton, who ended up only hitting about 4 fairways on the day, yet still ended up shooting 4 under par. In fact, at one point was in second place in the golf tournament. So like I said, we picked the right players, just not necessarily the right props. So looking to get back at prize picks today and go ahead and take down that 12.5x parlay. So as per usual, going to be covering my top 5 props in this video for my card tomorrow, and of course going to be 3 overs and 2 unders to try and take advantage of the most value that we can. So let's go ahead and hop right into it. First off with a review of round 1 to get an idea of what we can expect here for the second round. Alright guys, on the screen you can see the stats for round 2, and the main thing I want to say here is that the scoring average is right around what we expected. You can see it played to right around 0.6 shots under par. If I go ahead and unseparate this by wave, you'll see it played to exactly 0.6 of a stroke under par, but more importantly is taking a look at the morning versus the afternoon wave split. So in the morning it played right around half a stroke easier than the afternoon, and that was actually when the wind was the highest, which is definitely surprising. Of course, wind is the main factor that makes these golf courses harder, but the main thing to also consider is the firmness and fastness of these greens. In the morning, they were much damper, they were much more receptive as a result, and running closer to 11 and a half on the stimp meter. Now, as the day goes on, there's more and more sunlight out there. The wind also tends to dry out these greens a bit. They got faster towards 12, maybe even 12 and a half on the stimp meter, and also got a little bit firmer. So that's why you saw the scoring average get a little bit worse throughout the day. And especially when we consider the weather here for Friday, you're going to see the conditions are going to be a little bit tough because the wind isn't going away. In fact, it's actually getting stronger here for the second round. In the morning, you're looking at 15 to 20 miles an hour of sustained winds and upwards of 30 to maybe even 35 miles an hour of wind gusts, which is of course going to cause these players trouble. It's right around twice as strong as what we saw there for round 1. And even in the afternoon, where it does calm down a little bit, you can see right around 20 miles an hour of sustained winds towards midday, which is going to be absolute hell. It goes down to right around 14 to 15 miles an hour by day's end. So no matter when you're playing tomorrow, you're going to be exposed to the elements. So as a result, I would expect the scoring average to maybe be closer to a third of a stroke under par, closer to 0.3 rather than the 0.6 that we saw here for the first round, because of course going to play firmer and faster as the week goes on, but also just a little bit worse weather conditions as well. So hopping over to the prize picks board, now going to talk about my favorite props to go ahead and target, and you'll see that first and foremost we have 3 overs and 2 unders. Now of course the over here for projected 5 strokes is going to be a quote-unquote under because we are fading Charles Howell III there, but as per usual, this is going to give us a 12.5x parlay. It's going to let us take advantage of as much value as possible. So going to go prop by prop. Let's go ahead and start with greens of regulation, where we'll start with Patrick Cantlay at 12 GIR. And honestly, 12 GIR for anybody that's an elite tier player tomorrow, particularly if they're playing in the afternoon, is just going to be too low. And particularly for Patrick Cantlay, who looked extremely sharp today. Over the last 3 events, he had been a loser to the field with his approach play. But if you know anything about his long-term game, we know that he's gaining right around half a stroke per round. So one of the elite tier iron players on the PGA Tour, and you really saw that today. Ever since the get-go, he was out there taking aim at these pins and really getting it done with his iron play, so much so that his putting wasn't really a factor today. You know, usually Patrick Cantlay gets the knack for being one of the best putters on the PGA Tour, being somebody that can get extremely hot, and that wasn't why he had a 5 under round today. It was all about the ball striking. He was keeping himself in play, which is going to be extremely useful for round 2 as well, but more importantly, hitting these greens when he also had the shot. So believe it or not, these guys teeing off in the afternoon are going to have an advantage because the winds will be a little bit lower than in the morning, which if you're new here, you may not know that that's a little bit unique, but usually it's the other way around, right? Usually in the afternoon, we get a little bit stronger winds than in the morning. So going to be a little bit of a reverse bias, which only helps somebody like a Patrick Cantlay, who even if he was playing in the harder conditions, I would also be taking the over on at 12 GIR. I really like his chances to at the very least go ahead and push here, and somebody I have projected for 13.3 greens regulation tomorrow, which is well above his projection. The next guy I want to touch on is Webb Simpson at 11 GIR, which is another disrespectful number. even though he'll be teeing off in the morning, which is the harder of the two waves. He had a really rough go of it up until hole number 13 today, but from holes number 14 through 18, birdied all of them. Ended up with 5 straight birdies there, which of course is a lot of momentum going into the second round. But this is also a golf course where Webb Simpson has had a ton of success at the past. He's a past winner here. He's finished second place here before, is extremely accurate off the tee, which of course makes sense why he's played so well here over the years, but also a very precise iron player. So somebody who's not going to get himself into much trouble off the tee, which, like I said before, for Patrick Cantlay, is going to be extremely useful. But because of how many trees are at this golf course, when you get offline with the driver, you pretty much have no shot to hit the green in regulation. So when you're taking the overs for some of these GIR props, you got to make sure that they're guys that are going to keep themselves in position, or at the very least when they're missing, aren't missing 20 to 30 yards into the forest, because of course that's taking away a GIR every time they go ahead and do that type of thing. So because he's accurate off the tee, because he finished so strongly with his round today, somebody that I have projected for 13.1 GIR, which is again a whole 2.1 above his projection here. So love him. Just expect the iron play to continue over the last 5 holes that we saw today and into Friday's round. Next up, we have Justin Thomas, another GIR prop. They're at 11, and another guy that's being a little bit disrespected. He'll be teeing off in the afternoon, much like a Patrick Cantlay, so also going to be getting the favorable conditions. But more importantly, this is one of the best iron players in the world. Now, the reason why he missed a ton of greens today, the reason why his prop is this low, is because they're looking at those first round stats, and a lot of that was due to the driver. He was extremely inaccurate, was hitting the ball into the trees more often than he was hitting it into the small stuff, and it's hard to hit greens when you're doing that. Now, he's a very strategic player, somebody that'll look at his stats, will make adjustments from round to round. And one thing that we've seen from JT is that when he gets a little bit squirrely with the driving accuracy, he will lay up a lot more than others. And especially at a golf course like Harbour Town, where it's only 7,200 yards and you can pretty much lay up on every single hole. Would not be surprised tomorrow if he laid up on most tee boxes, just kept himself in play, and let himself rely on that iron play, which is usually the strong suit of his shots gain category. So definitely expect him to hit over 11 tomorrow. And much like a Webb Simpson, we have that push in our back pocket. They can miss 7 greens tomorrow, yet still push for us. So certainly high floor plays here for round 2. And of course, people that I end up hitting the over for us. Now moving over to our fades, of course, to get to a 12.5x parlay, we have to take stances against a few players, and the 2 that I'm going to be doing that with are going to be Charles Howell III and Ricky Fowler. So let's go ahead and start with Charles Howell III, where I'll be taking his over at hole number 5. It's a par 5. I have him at 4.5 shots. I expect him to make par or worse. It's a relatively long hole. It's 570 yards. So for somebody like Charles Howell III, for him to reach in 2 is going to take 2 perfect shots. But more importantly, this was a golf hole today that it played for right around a 50% birdie rate. But when we go ahead and split this by driving distance, there's a huge correlation between the guys that made birdies today and the guys that were relatively long. It played its full distance. It wasn't playing downwind. So as a result, guys like Charles Howell III that are almost certainly going to have to reach this in 3 shots. It's more about whether he can, hit a wedge to, 10, 15 feet and then make that putt. And just from a statistical perspective, I have him making a 4 here or better, a 4 or a eagle here, right around 38% of the time. So that means that 62% of the time, we are going to be hitting this prop, which makes it one of the better fades on the board. Now, the thing that differentiates Charles Howell III from the other guys here is the distance off the tee. Every other player on the board has at least 10 to maybe even 15 yards of distance on him. And even with that, I would still consider taking the over on a lot of these players. I mean, even a Jordan Spieth, even a Russell Knox, people like a Sungjae Im or Tommy Fleetwood, I would consider also fading in this category. But of course, when you have somebody that's almost certainly going to have to take this to 3 shots to get up there on put themselves in regulation, that's just a little bit of a higher percentage play than these guys that have a lot higher opportunity to get there in 2. I mean, realistically, people like a Webb Simpson, Sungjae Im, Corey Connors, for example, if they end up hitting the fairway, they're pretty much getting in 2 there every single time, or they're at the very most going to have an up and down to get a birdie. Whereas Charles Howell III, if he misses the fairway, he's almost certainly not getting there in 2, right? He's going to have a 100, 150-yard wedge shot into the screen to make a birdie, which makes it the fade that I'm looking at right there. And now lastly, the last fade we're looking at is Ricky Fowler at hole number 14, which is a par 3, relatively long hole, has water down the right side, and today you saw a ton of people bailing out. So for somebody like Ricky Fowler, who is by far the worst iron player of all the people on the board, you can see not that many people up here for hole number 14. A few good iron players. Maybe outside of a Snedeker, a Ricky Fowler, maybe a Billy Horschel, all relatively good iron players. So if I was going to consider taking the under on anybody, it would be a Snedeker, Fowler, or a Horschel. But the reason why we're going to Fowler is he shot well over par today. It was extremely inaccurate. The iron play wasn't there. He wasn't able to make any putts. And realistically, doesn't have all that much of a shot to make the cut. So perhaps he's a little bit checked out. He'll also be teeing off in the morning, which is when we're going to have the most difficult conditions of the entire day. And also somebody who's going to be at hole number 14 right around noon when it's going to be at its most difficult, when we're having those 25 to 30 mile an hour sustained winds. So not somebody I'm expecting to play well tomorrow. I know it's a single hole prop, which does make it a little bit more volatile than the rest, but this is a 200-yard par 3 with water on one side. It's going to be extremely windy. It's also exposed to the conditions. I'm expecting him to hit the under here. All right, that's all I've got here for the round 2 picks. Before we go on and get out of here, go ahead and let me know what your favorite pick on the board is down in the comments. Would love to hear from you guys. Make sure to go ahead and leave a comment down there. And also, make sure you like the video before you get out of here. And also, make sure you subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. We're going to have even more Prize Picks content coming throughout the weekend, so make sure you look forward to that. Best of luck with all of your props here for the second round. Hopefully we can hit for that 12.5x parlay. I appreciate all the support here. I'll see you guys next time. Let's get this cash.